Welcome back to SatoshiConomy, honest global crypto news and info, where the message is more important than the messenger. Today is Sunday, August 18th, 2019. As we speak, Bitcoin's at about 10,300. The tide is turning. I'm going to bring up about 15 points to prove, or to strongly suggest to you that we're not beginning to enter into a recession. We're not beginning to enter into a Great Recession, or even a depression, or even the Great Depression. We're beginning to enter into the Greatest Depression. And I wholeheartedly believe that, but it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is that you have information available to you to assist you in making your own decision, because I understand and realize that everybody's situation is unique. But first, I want to just bring up a comic that was very interesting and poignant. And it was just a picture. It was a Charlie Brown comic. Linus and Lucy were in the classroom at their desk, and Linus is turning around talking to Lucy, and he says, "No one is going to give you the education you need to overthrow them." And the reason why I bring that up is because the global economic, financial design and conditions that we're in is really the result of centuries of processes that have been in place. And in particular, certain entities or families even that have been known to be strongly affecting and influencing situations that are evident today as we sit. And I'm just going to start rattling them off, and with the premise being that just please consider some of these points. Knowledge is not power. It is the execution of that knowledge which will incur power. So, number one, just recently, of course, we've got to consider the recent stock market woes. I think there's one day, certainly within the last 12 days, I think there's one day we lost 800 points, another 500 points, and another 300 points. And in December of 2018 was the worst December in stock market history for 87 years. And with the recent pullbacks and losses, that comes on the heels of the Fed's dropping the interest rate, 25 basis points. So that to me is exceptionally startling. Another case to consider is just the notion of the QE endgame. Many people don't even know what QE stands for. It's quantitative easing. And it was a phraseology that was never heard of before the 2008 bank bailout. And simply put, what it means is money printing to bail out banks. And so they've gone through 3 phases or more. And Steve Mnuchin in July called an emergency press conference. It was the day before the congressional hearings were scheduled to happen, where they grilled David Marcus, the CEO of the Libra Project, Facebook's Libra Project. And during that press conference, it wasn't that long, but someone asked him about the possibility of the government shutdown looming. And he said, "You know what? I can't order quantitative easing," like as if he had that much power. He is the Treasury Secretary after all, but what he went on to say was, "That's the job of the Congress." And I was like, whoa, we have gone way past even any presidential candidate during their campaigns saying things like, "I'm going to minimize taxes. I shouldn't be laughing," or "I'm going to balance the budget." In the consciousness of even the mainstream media and the highest connected Oval Office members, they say, it's coming, it's going to happen, it's part of the modus operandi now, it's the job of the Congress. Unbelievable. The end game of that is that there has to be a reset of some sort. And it's got to involve G20, the biggest, largest nations on earth. Another interesting factor is the stock buybacks. This is something that used to be illegal, but now owners of companies and presidents and large stockholders can buy back the stocks. And essentially what it does is it just props up the value of the company artificially until it just falls in on itself. And in my opinion, that's what's going to happen. It's should be illegal. Another factor that's been taking place, this one for decades, is where the sovereign nations, they change the metrics by which they measure and report on economic factors. Go to shadowstats.com. Stats, which is short for statistics, it's shadowstats.com. A young man named John Williams has been reporting on that for, I think, about 20 years, where they changed the way that they report to make it sound. It's really just smoke and mirrors to the unbeknownst, or to the general public. For example, the way that they report unemployment has changed greatly over the years. They used to report, by head count to anybody who's unemployed, but then they changed it to only being a head count amongst those who had been on the unemployment program and whose benefits had expired, or they were either on a program or had expired sometime within this last 6 months. If you're outside of that and still without a job, you weren't counted as part of the unemployment. So without having to count them, it really paints a rosier picture than what the truth is. most recently, I looked very specifically at some of his information a few months ago, and he estimates that the actual true figures of unemployment in America are closer to 20%. Just saying. Central banks have been buying up gold since the end of 2018 at almost record rates, certainly the highest rates that they have been in a long time. And that's interesting because what that really means is they're hedging for safety. I wonder why. Gold has been appreciating at a higher rate in the last 60 to 100 days. Same with silver. I remember when not too long ago silver was under 13 bucks. I haven't looked recently, but I know it's above 16 now, I think. Check that out in the show notes. Sovereign nations are calling for their own digital currencies. That's another factor. Why are they doing that? So that they can have more control over their particular economies, because they're seeing the importance and the necessity to watch their pennies so their dollars take care of themselves. China last week announced the soon-to-be launched national digital currency, and they also said that it's going to replace M0 or cash on the streets. And what this really means is the Politburo, the Chinese Communist Party, is going to be able to track and trace every single transaction. And this is in a country where they've been known to facial recognize all the elementary kids going into school. Also, they have a Sesame project, I understand, where they have reportedly disenfranchised over 100 million people because they may have spoken to the wrong people or voted the wrong way or attended the wrong event, and they turn their switch off. They won't be able to cash checks or to even ride the public transportation. Or, yeah, I heard that from Andreas Antonopoulos yesterday. I think that was from a keynote speech that he made at We Are Blockchain Developers or Blockchain Devs. That was in June, I believe. But Buffett has amassed $130 billion in cash. Again, the question is why? Here's the world's, if not one of the world's most famous and followed investors. It's obviously because he's trying to position himself to swoop up companies or value on the cheap. He said that he's got that much cash because he can't find, and this is, I think, a valid point. He says that he can't find good value. What he's really saying is he thinks the stock market's going to crash. I mean, can we just be real? Another factor is, this was very interesting, Bulgaria became the first country, I think less than 30 days ago, to actually have more value of Bitcoin than they do have in gold. So there's countries all over the world that are in recession territory, just like Japan. I know India in 2016, they stopped the use of their two largest currencies, which really crushed a lot of value for the common people in a country where I think about 85% of the transactions are made with cash. And they gave their civilians, I think, only about 5 or 6 hours notice. Hey, check back with me on Monday or Tuesday. Wow. Of course, in the USA and China, there are reports, there's news on the trade wars. Last week, China notably reduced the value of the Chinese yuan. One thing we've got to also consider is that the debt to GDP ratio is over 1.0. What that means, I think it's about 1.2, but what basically means is the U.S. produces more debt than they do product. And I don't think I'm mistaken to say that the vast majority of sovereign nations on Earth have a higher debt-to-income ratio. There's only, stepping back a little bit, to some of the sovereign nations calling for their own digital currency. Iran is one of them. They want to have theirs backed with gold. And that's interesting because Iran is one of only, I think, 4 countries on Earth who own their own central bank. I think it's Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria do not have a central bank that's owned by the Rothschilds. Let's see. One thing to consider is something that's not talked about a lot is the derivative bubble. To estimate that, they call it, there's a term that I've heard recently, it's called the spaghetti economy. It's hard to tell where it starts and stops. There's no way to even, it's hard to quantify it, but the derivative bubble, what would be owed in the event of a bank bailout or crash, is over $1 quadrillion. Let's see, what's another thing to consider? Oh, Denmark last week announced the first ever in history that we've heard of a negative interest mortgage. They're saying, in other words, hey, we'll give you a mortgage, you don't even have to pay back as much as we give you. And how is that possible? It's possible because of the fundamental banking system that we live in worldwide and globally. It's known as the fractional reserve lending system, where if a bank has $1 million in their ledger, they can lend out $10 million. So, for conversation, if they loan you $100,000, once you pay them back $10,000, they, practically speaking, begin to have an appreciation after $10,000. They begin to make a profit after about $10,000, practically speaking. Another big thing to be considering is the unrest that's going on all over the world. One thing we don't hear a lot about in America is the Yellow Vest movement that's been taking place. They've got to be about 40 weeks now in a row. They come out en masse in the streets of London, in streets of Paris, to protest the economic depravity that's going on there. Macron was a recently elected president, I think is what they call their leader there. It might be prime minister, but Macron is their leader. He's the Rothschild fan. He's in the Rothschild family. So I bring all of these things up because I'm not a financial advisor, but just because I said that, that's why you should listen. And I'm serious. And I'm not downing financial advisors, but what they do is they're trained to recognize and to appreciate all of the traditional economic theory and the ways that the present or decades-old financial system has operated. So they're entrenched in that, and naturally they'll, at first they would be opposed to an economic system that is available. So what I'm saying, I'm not a financial advisor, but just consider for yourself some of these things. Because what is now available to anyone is the ability for anyone without permission to have a bank in their pocket. Not a bank account in their pocket, to literally have a bank in their pocket. So for the first time, there's billions upon billions of people who have been kept from having the privilege of a bank account. I'm sorry, I thought I did that do not disturb so I wouldn't be interrupted during the video, but I'm going to try to continue this. It's probably going to ring again and I'll shut it off again. But where I was at was that billions upon billions of people have been stopped from having the privilege of having a bank account, but without permission they can participate in an economy that really is free, market dynamic, that has censorship resistance, that has inflation resistance, that is really decentralized in nature. It doesn't have the controls that the traditional economies have by sovereign governments or banks. And that is, something for you to consider. And for all of you who have a 401k, I would strongly suggest considering switching very soon your investments into where you can still get 1 or 2% annual in bonds. But I suggest that because you won't get into cryptocurrencies because you still think that's something that the mainstream, lamestream, fake stream media says is for drug smugglers, money launderers, and all these other bad actors. Well, that's what they said about the internet when it started to launch. But now we have sovereign nations calling for their own digital currencies. Well, make your own choice. But once you get into the bonds, and then you start, after you see that some of your stocks and all that will lose, 20, 30, 40, 50%, well, then I think you'll be ready to strongly consider something like Bitcoin or some other decentralized cryptocurrency. So if you've gained some insights or value, please do me a favor and click on the blue planet there. I would appreciate it so that more people will be able to hear some of the suggestions. And truly, I do appreciate your own ability and sovereign right to decide for yourself. I'm just trying to get information out there to assist you in making your own decision. So #LoveAll, serve others. Thank you very much for your attention. Until next time, peace.